The river had already taken her husband, her land, and nearly her life when the cowboy found her tangled in reeds, soaked to the bone, breath ragged and eyes burning, with the kind of fear that doesn't fade when danger passes. And he lifted her from the current without asking her name, without hesitation, carrying her to the bank like a promise kept too late. And when she coughed water and life back into herself, she saw him, weathered face, quiet eyes, a man who looked like he'd learned long ago that saving someone didn't mean staying, and yet he stayed, building a fire with hands scarred by work and regret while she shivered in clothes, made heavy by the river, pride warring with need, until she whispered the words that surprised even her. "Will you stay if I undress?" Not as an invitation, but as a plea, because the cold was cruel and loneliness colder. And the cowboy turned away instantly, voice steady, telling her he would guard the river itself if it meant she lived. And in that moment she understood something powerful, that respect can be more intimate than touch, that safety can feel like love before love ever dares speak its name. She told him she was a widow, that the town upstream blamed her for surviving when her husband didn't, that every door had closed since the funeral, and the cowboy listened without fixing her, without pity, only adding wood to the fire, and saying little except that the river wasn't done teaching her yet. And when dawn came, he offered to escort her home, though. Home was little more than a leaning shack and a memory of laughter. And as they walked the long road together, the west seemed less empty, less cruel, and the cowboy, who had sworn never to stay anywhere, again felt the dangerous pull of a life that might ask him to stop running. And if this story already has you leaning closer, remember to subscribe to the channel, because stories like this, where strength meets tenderness, are told here every week. The widow's cabin smelled of wet wood and old grief, but the cowboy repaired what he could without being asked, mending boards, fixing a door that no longer locked, while she watched from the threshold, wondering how a stranger could treat her life with more care than those who had known her for years. And nights passed where they spoke quietly by lantern light about loss, about roads taken and roads avoided, about the ache of wanting something again and fearing the cost. And though the air between them carried tension, it never crossed into hunger without permission, because the cowboy understood that desire without safety is just another kind of taking. And when trouble finally came, men from town demanding she leave land they wanted, he stood beside her, not as a savior but as a witness, making it clear that she was no longer alone. And she found her voice again, strong and unafraid, telling those men the river hadn't taken her so she could drown on dry land. Didn't hide, asking if he would stay now, not because she was cold, not because she needed saving, but because she wanted him. And this time his answer wasn't silence or distance, but a nod, heavy with meaning, because staying is the bravest thing a wanderer can do. And as seasons changed, the land healed with them. Laughter returned to the cabin, and love grew not from urgency but from choice. And if this ending stirred something in you, if you believe the Wild West wasn't only about guns and grit, but about hearts learning to trust, then subscribe, like, and stay with the channel, because the best stories are the ones we choose not to walk away. Vermont winter came early that year, laying frost across the valley and testing every promise made in warmer months. And it was in that quiet, difficult season that the widow and the cowboy learned what staying truly meant, because love was no longer just lantern light and shared stories, but hard mornings, empty cupboards, aching hands, and the fear that maybe hope had been borrowed against a future that might not arrive. And when sickness struck her, river chill that never fully left her bones, he sat through long nights, listening to her breathing, remembering the moment he first turned his back by the fire to give her dignity, realizing now that dignity was not distance but devotion. And the town that once whispered began to change slowly, as people saw the cowboy work the land beside her without claiming it, saw her stand taller with each passing week, no longer the woman pulled from the river, but the woman who survived it. And when spring finally broke through the frost, they planted together, hands in the same soil, laughter returning like a song half forgotten. And one evening by that same river, calm now, almost gentle, she asked him not if he would stay, but why he did, and he told her the truth at last, that saving her had saved something in himself, that he had spent years riding away before life could ask anything of him. And she answered by resting her head against his shoulder, not asking for vows or names for what they were, because some bonds don't need words to hold them. And as the sun set over the water that once nearly claimed her, they stood together, knowing the Wild West would always be harsh, always demand strength, but that shared strength could turn survival into a life worth living. And if this chapter felt like a quiet triumph after the storm, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because stories like this remind us that sometimes the bravest ending isn't riding away, it's choosing to stay. The fourth season they faced together was not marked by weather but by choice, because peace in the West never announced itself without a test. And when a land agent arrived with papers claiming the valley for the railroad, the widow felt the old fear rise again, the fear of being told she did not belong, that survival was only temporary. And the cowboy watched her hands tremble as she read words meant to erase her life with ink instead of water. And though his instinct was to ride out and handle it alone, he remembered what staying had taught him. So they faced the threat side by side, gathering neighbors who had once turned away, but now owed her quiet respect. And she spoke before them all, voice steady, telling her story not as a victim, but as a woman who had bled, worked and endured for every inch of that land. And when resistance grew, the agent left with warnings instead of victories. And that night by the fire she admitted she had always feared loving him would mean losing herself again. And he answered that he had feared loving her would mean becoming someone who could no longer run. And they laughed at the honesty of it, understanding that love had not chained them, but rooted them. And when he finally asked, not with a ring or grand speech, but with a simple question, whether she wanted him there for all the seasons still to come, she said yes without hesitation, because the river no longer defined her story. And as dawn broke over the valley, the cabin standing stronger than before, they knew the Wild West had not softened, but they had learned how to stand within it together. And if this chapter made you believe that real courage grows in quiet decisions, remember to subscribe to the channel, because the strongest stories are built one choice at a time.